Today we're talking about the letter Yod, and it is the 10th letter ordinally in the Hebrew alphabet. This is part 10 of our Revealing the Hebrew Letters series. And Yod also has the gematria of 10, although the ordinal and the gematria is getting ready to switch up here after this letter. So the Yod is a transitional letter into the other part of the Hebrew alphabet. The Yod is a mere dot. It's the building block of every other letter. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet begins with a Yod and it ends with a Yod. And so it's said to be the spark of the Spirit in everything. The picture of the Yod is pictorially, it looked like an arm with a hand on it. Now it's just in this classical sense, it's a dot with a little swoop on it. And it's said to be a hand or the hand of God, and it can also mean a flame. So many Jewish rabbis say it's the fiery hand of God. Now, I want you to understand that the Yod being a spark or a pilot light, more or less, for the rest of these letters is quite significant because as we read the entire Bible, that on the day of Pentecost, there was what looked like flames of fire on their heads, and they began to speak in other tongues as the Holy Spirit gave them utterance. There was a fire, there was a flame on top of their heads. And we believe that the Holy Spirit of God, it represents the flame of fire and also wind. All right, so think about this. Even Jewish rabbis will tell you that when you have a Yod in a word and a Hey together, that represents Pentecost. That represents the number 50, the number of breakthrough, the number of Pentecost. And so on the day of Pentecost, when it came, there was tongues of fire. Now, what we believe, the Bible tells us that the baptism of the Holy Spirit, the Yod and the Hey together, the fire and the wind together, brings new life in the Spirit. It brings forth of the power of God within us. And so when God breathes the Hey onto the fire, it takes that spark and it lifts it into a new realm of combustion. And that's why people that are filled with the Holy Spirit, truly filled with the Holy Spirit, with the evidence of speaking in other tongues, and I'm not going to sit here and debate that with you. It's in the Bible. I will not sit here and debate that with you. There's no reason to debate that. It happened. But nevertheless, when people that are filled with the Holy Spirit, they have the spark, they have the life of God on the inside of them. However, when God breathes on them new life, when they are immersed in the power of the Holy Spirit, that combustion of fire begins to spring forth and it sets them on fire and they really catch fire for God, right? So the Yod is a flame, it's a hand. It also symbolizes the Jews. It's symbolic of the Jewish people. It's a transition into the next group of letters. It hinges between two great commandments, the Old and New Testament. With the hand of God, we flip the page from the era of the law into the era of the grace of God, of Jesus coming to fulfill the law. All right? So the entire word Yod shows the law coming through Moses and moves into grace in the Spirit. The Yod is made up of these three other letters, even within that, which is a Yod and a Vav and a Dalet. Rather, this is not the letter, this is the word Yod spelled out, is the Yod, the Vav, which is a connector, and the Dalet. So it's said that God, when He created the universe, it started with a spark. It started with that finite power, the atom of the universe that God created when He spoke the world into existence. And that Yod moved into a connection with the Dalet, which is the doorway to creation. And so we see even that word Yod being the spark of the Spirit. It starts small and it ends in something much larger. God is all into multiplication, into taking the finite things, small things, into making them something much bigger. You remember and I'll go back a little bit further. Do you remember the Zion, how it was, starts the word zara, which means a seed. How God takes the seed and he moves that Zion into the number 8, which is the chet, new life, new beginnings. And that moves into the number 9, which is processing new life, which is a picture of pregnancy, of developing that new life. Now we're into the number 10, the yod, where that spark has come into a fullness. It's beginning to overflow of the fullness of God. And so God takes things that are small, he moves them into things that are much larger. All right, let's look at the number 10 for just a moment. The number 10 is the number 5 doubled. It's the number 5, which is the hay, doubled. So it's the breath. There's, once again, that connection to the hay, the breath of God, but it's the hay doubled. Now, the hay, as we know, which is the number 5, ordinarily in the Hebrew alphabet and in the gematria, that hay means grace. Now think about that for just a moment. We have grace, which is 5. In the yod, we have grace doubled. So we have 10, which is a double grace. And it's interesting to note as well that on each hand, we have 5 fingers. That creates the number 10. The palm, or the hand rather, is the number 5, and we have 2 hands. That's 10 fingers on each hand. So with God's hand, he created the universe with his mouth, by his hand, by the spark in his mouth. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. On the inside of our mouths is a hidden letter. The letter Pe, which we'll talk about later. I've talked about this in some of my other videos. The number for the Pe is the number 80. And the Pe represents the mouth, and it means to speak things into existence that don't exist, to speak out into existence, to speak. And so the Pe on the inside has that hidden letter, Bet, which means to create. It's a letter of creation and habitation. However, on the Pe, there's a Yod that hangs down. And so it's the spark that lights the fire. So think about it like this. When God created the world, with his mouth, he spoke the world into existence. He created with his mouth. There's a hidden force on the inside of our mouths that is there to create. When God spoke that creative power, there's a yod, there's a tongue on the inside of us that is a flame of fire that is used in contention with the mouth to create. Of course, the paradoxical part of that could be that we use our tongues also to curse, because we can bless or we can curse. And so the tongue can be a tongue of fire, not in a good way, but also in a bad way. However, like on the day of Pentecost, a tongue of fire can be a good thing. And that is whenever the Holy Spirit began to breathe life onto the people of God and create a new life, which ended up sparking the New Testament church, which is the era that we are in now. There was a multiplication that happened with the yod, with the tongue. Just as the yod multiplies, just as we count by tens and multiply 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, and that number continues to multiply and multiply. There was a multiplication that happened on the day of Pentecost, in which numbers were continually added to them and multiplied to them, and the church grew, not by addition, but by multiplication. So the yod is a very powerful letter. It's the spark of the Spirit of God in everything. There is a yod in every other letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Think about that for just a moment. There is a yod, there's a spark in every other letter of the Hebrew alphabet. God has given us the power to create. He's given us the power of life and death, which is held in the tongue, in our yod that's on the inside of our mouths. So see how it represents a hand, but also in the Pe, it represents the tongue. God's fiery hand is in our tongues. God needs to control our tongues. God needs to have control of our mouths. The book of James talks about the tongue and how it can be a controlling rudder that can control our destinies, that can control both good and evil, depending on how we use that. And so we need to make sure that God, with His fiery hand, has control of our tongues. He has control of our mouths so that we can use those mouths to create good as opposed to evil. And last week we talked about the paradoxical letter of the tet and how when God spoke the world into existence, He spoke, it is tov, which started with the letter tet. And so it's paradoxical and it can be used for good or evil, okay? And so that tet, remember, was a serpent coiled up ready to strike, or it was a woman that was about to give birth. It was something good that was hidden on the inside of it. So, once again, with the yod, we see that we can use what God gives us either for His good or for our own gain, for evil and for Satan's good. Listen, today I hope that you've enjoyed this teaching. I know I've enjoyed bringing it to you. As always, these letters are getting ready to morph and to change. We're coming out of the ordinal gematria period into something a little bit different, so you're not going to want to miss next week. Until next time, God bless. We'll see you real soon. Please be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and ring that notification bell so you can receive updates for when new content arrives. Also be sure to visit our website at gbreaker.org. From there you can learn more about Groundbreaker International, and if the Lord leads you to do so, you can sow a financial seed of blessing. Now I would like to invite you to check out one of these other videos from Groundbreaker International's YouTube channel. Until next time, God bless.